What's going on, gamer boys and gamer girls? I got a question to ask you. What's the difference between Five Nights at Freddy's and a game like Transistor? Well, one of the game has memorable characters, an amazing plot, atmospheric moments, and the other is Five Nights at Freddy's. Does that make Five Nights at Freddy's worse than Transistor? No, it doesn't. It's really just an objective thought. But there seems to be this weird trend in video gaming where games with less story and less plot seem to have the most plot and the most story. I don't get it. Think of your game as a cup. It can be filled with anything, and you can put as much character, plot development, world building as much as you want in this dirty ass cup. But there are some games that are chock full of things, inside of the cup. And then there are games that don't have anything in the cup at all. So I want to take a look at some games that have garnered a lot of attention in this type of way, with their lack of story, but have garnered a lot of attention from that lack of story. Now come with me. Let's travel back to the past of the distant year of 2012. If you're alive in the year 2012 and you're on YouTube, you probably knew of a certain game going around on YouTube. A certain scary game, if you will. A game that got a lot of YouTubers, a lot of traction, and got them to basically where they are today. I'm talking of Slenderman. Everyone knows of Slenderman. Slenderman the 8 Pages. Slenderman the 8 Pages was a creepypasta turned into a video game, turned into a movie, turned into a book, turned into a lot of things. But the one thing that I really wanted to focus on is that how little story there is of Slender, but how much story people put into Slender. Slenderman was based off of a creepypasta, and really the story just kind of goes like Slenderman is a really old guy who kidnaps kids in their sleep and when they're alone, and that's it. That's pretty much the whole Slenderman folklore. But because of the video game, because of the movie, because of all these books, because of all these other movie tie-ins that came in after Slenderman the 8 Pages, Slenderman became way more than just a guy who just kidnaps kids and does things like that. Let's look at Marble Hornets, for example. When you look at Marble Hornets, they have this whole story that I'm not gonna research, but they have this whole story, Slenderman is stalking them. They're looking for Slenderman. You see all these pages, you see all these things. Slenderman appears on their porch. Ooh, spooky. Contrary to the actual Slender lore from the creepypasta, that's not what Slenderman does. Slenderman kidnaps kids in their sleep, in the dark, and he kills them. That's what he does. The people get all these other things mixed into it, and they create more story from less story. It's weird. A more recent, when I mean recent, I mean really recent example is Baldi Basics. Now, Baldi's Basics doesn't have a story. And I'm not saying that because I don't want to find out if it has a story. I've played Baldi's Basics, and it doesn't have a story. I'm pretty sure what the developer of the game wanted to do was just make a simple, collect-a-thon type game. You go, you look for books, you solve math problems, Baldi gets a little angry every single time, and then you get out and you win. That's Baldi's Basics. There's nothing more and there's nothing less. I'm pretty sure the developer had no intentions of this game getting as much hype as it actually did. Baldi's Basics blew up on YouTube, blew up in the gaming industry, and we'll probably see about 2, maybe 3 other iterations. We've already seen other people make different versions of Baldi's Basics in Unreal Engine and things like that. But why? There's a creator on YouTube by the name of Treesicle, and he's kind of caught my attention because he currently has 5 theories on Baldi's Basics, which is weird. I haven't looked at any of them. I haven't watched them. Just the fact that he has theories on Baldi's Basics kind of irks me. This once again comes back to the thing of game with no story. Gaining story. People look in the game, realize that there's nothing in it, and so they go, I'm gonna put something there myself. And they do it. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that kind of irks me personally. I don't think Baldi's Basic has anything good to be theorized in it. It's just kind of like a quirky little horror game, if you will. It's not bad, but it is stupid. You guys remember that game Hello Neighbor? Because I don't. And nobody does. And nobody will. It was a bad game, and we should all forget it. But we shouldn't forget what it did. If you watch Let's Plays, and you've probably seen Markiplier's or Jacksepticeye's or anybody else's Let's Play on all of the alphas and the betas of Hello Neighbors. It was like basically getting a Christmas every single other day. Because all the alphas for Hello Neighbors gave you a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more of that story that you really wanted. But it got more complicated. You see, Hello Neighbor intended to have story. But I think it wanted too much story. When Alpha 1 of Hello Neighbor came out, it was kind of great. It was like basically just getting the game as it is, but it's just being like a really short game. When you get into it, you realize that your neighbor kidnapped his wife, kidnapped some lady, and keeps her in her basement. That's great. You figured that out. It's got a story, and that's it. That's great. But then Alpha 2 came out. And Alpha 2 was like, no, it's not his wife, it's his wife's mistress, and she got hit by a car, and she's in the basement, and I don't want you coming in my house. And then Alpha 3 came out. And Alpha 3 was like... and Alpha 3 was like, nah, fuck all that. I'm actually the devil. And I kidnapped my wife's baby's dad, and I'm keeping them all in the basement. And my basement has like an underground tunnel system and like a demon, and it's super deep, guys. You just have to play it. And then we got the final game, and boy howdy, was it a fucking shit show. I'm gonna bypass all the things about how the graphics were really poor and the cutscenes were really bad and the physics of the game just didn't make sense. I mainly just want to talk about how they tried to implement all of the alpha story, trying to get into one crazy story, because it didn't work. I think the developers of Hello Neighbor really wanted to have this elaborate and crazy story so people can theorize it and people can talk about it for years on years on years, and they really wanted a great story, but they muddied it too much with too much story. Hello Neighbor should have just been this guy who kidnapped some woman, probably his wife, and just kept her in a basement. The point I'm trying to make is that Slender and Baldi's Basics, you can kind of make a story with those two. Kinda. Slenderman is very mysterious, but already kind of came with the story, and people just want to elaborate onto it. Baldi's Basics has no story whatsoever, so people make up a story, regardless if it makes sense or not. It's just what people want to do. Hello Neighbor had too much story, and so with that, you just get all these random Lego pieces that don't click together at all, and so nothing comes of it. You can't make a good story from an already horrible story. It just kind of doesn't work. But the last game I want to talk about is probably one that everybody knows of. And it's the worst offender of them all, but for many different reasons. Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's is an amazing game. and here's why. If you go back and just play Five Nights at Freddy's 1, you realize that Scott Cawthon had no idea that Five Nights at Freddy's was going to be one of the biggest horror franchises of all time. So Scott Cawthon just made a generic scary game. It has jump scares, you're in a dark environment, it's got a little mystery to it, you know, but he didn't make the game for longevity. He made it as just a one-off game. And that lies the problem. Scott Cawthon was not prepared that his little game, Five Nights at Freddy's, was going to garner so much attention that he himself was going to make 6 more sequels, a couple books, and a movie tie-in. He wasn't ready for that. So, neither was his story. Five Nights at Freddy's already has the story embedded into the first game. You can see it all in the context and the subcontext that is presented right there in front of you. The story is basically of a haunted pizzeria. One of the machines malfunctioned at a kid's birthday party, accidentally killed one of the kids, and now the dead kid's soul is now haunting the place and is taking over the animatronics' bodies and is killing the night guards. That's the story. But Scott didn't know that. Scott just wanted to make a game. But everybody else, they wanted more story. And so Scott gave him that story. And so Five Nights at Freddy's became more elaborate, with every tie-in coming more and more and more. The point I'm trying to make is that all these games, they either have or don't have story. Baldi's Basics, with its complete lack of story, but people build the story up where there is none to be had. Game like Hello Neighbor, with the story being filled to the brim with story that it just keeps overfilling, and there's too much of it, and you can't. What the fuck are you supposed to do with all this fucking story? And then you have Slender, but there is a story, but people want a more complicated and more story. And then you have Five Nights at Freddy's with an amazing story, but he's giving you all these puzzle pieces to the story in the dumbest way possible. I'm not really saying anything here. I'm not stating something that I think most people already know. I'm not really pulling the wool over anyone's eye. I'm just confused as to why these games keep happening. I don't get it.